The most notable thing at the end of this whole thing was the surprise reveal of Ghost of Yotei, which is the successor slash sequel to Ghost of Tsushima. But one thing that caught people off guard and caught people's attention is the fact that you are no longer playing as Jin Sakai in this game. You're playing as a character by the name of, what is it? I gotta go back over here. Hold on. Goes by the name of Atsu, who is a female Ronin. Also, take note is that this game takes place 300 years after the events of Ghost of Tsushima, which means that obviously that Jin is long dead by this point. And then this game takes place obviously in Yotei, which is the mountain in the region at the time, which was known as Ezo, which we now know today as, in Japan, as Hokkaido. So this was before Hokkaido became Hokkaido, but it takes place within that region. Seems to kind of be, from what I've heard, it seems to be kind of encroaching on the end of the samurai era, where a lot of the Western influence came into play. So by the end of the trailer, you kind of see her using a lot of different weapons, and the kind of sound off into the trailer is her using what is a musket, which is kind of what, you know, the Western influence of that era for Japan, essentially. The response to this whole thing has generally been positive from what I've seen so far. However, that is not to say that it has all been sunshine and roses, as there has been some form of drama popping up about this whole thing that I've seen as of late. And truth be told, I think it's kind of justified. And this is the part where I'm kind of going to go into a bit of a tirade on this. I got to a point as I was putting the notes together a couple days ago. I realized that I should probably start writing this stuff down precisely to get my point across, because I don't want to get to a point where I didn't want to get to a point where I got to the episode and then completely forgot all of my important points that I wanted to drive home in this particular episode. So let me explain exactly what's going on here and why people are kind of apprehensive about Sucker Punch, this new Ghost of game, and why. So while people are willing to give the game a chance, there's still a level of apprehension surrounding it. And I would argue, especially after the events of the past few years, I mean, hell, even the past few months alone, is justified. The past 6 months have shown that gamers are tired of the heavy-handed political messaging that attempts to appeal to the modern audience. The attacks from developers for even the slightest bit of criticism, the swapping of races and genders, and the intent of characters with reckless abandon, the being talked down to if you're straight white or male, even worse if you're a straight white male, the admission from developers themselves that they want to erase white people from the industry. So much so that if your game even has a whiff of DEI from it or any of its developers, it's an immediate pass. Because all the actions that the gaming industry as a whole has made over the past few years alone has made the gaming community extremely and hypersensitive to woke as a whole. And honestly, I can't blame them. And while Sucker Punch as a studio may not have a history of such conduct yet, people have dug into both the model actress that they're using for the main character, which is Atsu, and the director of the game, which they found tells a very different story. Especially their social media accounts, which basically raise every red flag of the very things that many within the gaming community have developed an intolerance for. And again, I can't blame them for being that way. Not because they're racists, bigots, or transphobes, but because they've been burned one too many times for even attempting to give this stuff a chance. Remember what I said a few episodes ago. Once is an accident, twice is coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. You know, one of our greatest strengths as a species is our pattern recognition ability. And truth be told, the past few months alone have shown enough patterns that the gaming community can tell when and how a game will fail. And to the uninformed, To the people on the outside looking in, this pattern recognition will seem like clairvoyance. But outside of this, there is a subset of people, myself included, that wanted to see Jin's story continue. Though for me personally, I'm not all that surprised they went down the new character / female character route. Ghost of Tsushima being one of my favorite games of 2020. In fact, I have a video of that on my channel right now. And because of that, there is a quote in that video that I want to point out to for the reason why I had an idea that this was going to happen at some point. In that video, I said, and I quote, and some people might disagree with me about this depending on how you feel about the original game. Granted, me saying this does not mean that I hate the first game. Like I said, it's one of my favorite games of 2020. The one thing I pointed out in the game's story that I felt was an issue to me, and I quote, I said, unfortunately, our protagonist isn't the most relatable character. I would even go so far as to call him two-dimensional, angry or stoic, more the latter than the former. It's the characters around him that give him any reason to show more qualities than the two you normally see. This changes Ghost of Tsushima from the story of Jin Sakai to the story of Tsushima Island and its people. There were moments throughout the story where I started to feel as if one of the characters supporting Jin was originally the intended protagonist instead of Jin himself. The characters surrounding Jin have far more complex histories and motivations that drive them. In retrospect, I realized I even had more of an attachment to Jin's horse than the man himself. Now, for those that played the first game, there's one character in particular that I'm referring to, and you might be able to piece that together for yourself. But there was part of me that was hoping that they could add a bit more depth to Jin as a character and explore that more in a true sequel than to completely throw him to the side as a character, to which will likely be relegated down to him being either an honorable mention in the story or him having a major influence over the world at large. And they talk about the things he did post the events of Ghost of Tsushima, which we will likely never see now because we're playing a different character. But regardless, I am still looking forward to this, as I love the first game. But like the rest of the gaming community, I am cautiously optimistic about this. And again, I can't blame gamers for being cautious about this because they've been burned a lot. Where they see things like this coming from either the people that work on the game, the characters that breathe life into the actors that breathe life into the characters of the game. I understand where it's coming from. I can't say they're wrong. They're not wrong for being apprehensive, especially with where it comes from, especially the history of this kind of stuff happening in the industry, the patterns that people are seeing. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping the best for the game. Truth be told, I'm hoping it's good, and I'm hoping it doesn't have too much of what people would call woke inside the game. But when you look at the people that are behind it, it almost seems inevitable that at some point it's going to have a very heavy-handed dose of the very shit that has caused a lot of recent games to straight up fail. And that would suck. Anyways, moving on from that. Let's see what's going on in the chat real quick before I move on. Depends on whether, I guess Fancy must have typoed here from autocorrect. She meant to say Yotei instead of whatever that other word is. Depends on whether or not Yotei is close to Tsushima. We'll see what happens. But again, this game takes place 300 years after the events of the first game. So whatever happened with Jin, the man is long dead at this point. And whatever he did post that first game, that is, yeah. You're probably going to be hearing about that more so than seeing it. And that kind of sucks as somebody who would have liked to have seen them develop Jin as a character and flesh him out to give him more dimensions. And when I say dimensions, I don't mean turn him into a blubbering, crying fool all the time every time something bad happens to him. I think that is also very off-putting for a character. I meant giving him more dimensions than just being angry or stoic or the I'm here to save the world aesthetic that he kind of had in the first game. They kept touching on this idea of a darkness that was hidden within them, but by the time you finish the game, none of that really ever comes to pass. That idea is never really explored that much in that first game. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity, especially with the way that first game ends, or at least depending on the ending you choose. And the idea that we're never going to see the side effects of that and experience that or even play that kind of sucks.